Hey guys, Colleen Wolfe from NFL Network. And look, you may or may not know, I'm from Philly. I'm ride or die Philadelphia, but especially when it comes to sports. So you guys need to check out Mike Small on the Killin Me Smallz podcast. This guy crushes it, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say next.
You're killing me, Smallz.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Killin Me Smallz podcast. I am your host, Mike Small. Well, I can't imagine any sports fan in America did not watch the premiere episodes of The Last Dance, looking at Michael Jordan and his final championship with the Chicago Bulls. On the podcast today, Jordan's college teammate from 1982 to 1984, former Carolina player and coach Matt Doherty. Matt will tell stories of what Mike was like before he became Michael. We will look back at his coaching experience succeeding the legendary Dean Smith after a brief stint from Bill Guthridge, what he learned, and how it shaped what he's doing now. With all that's going on with COVID-19, we are doing a free commercial on the Killin Me Smallz podcast for a different small business every week. So along with Kobe Fryer and Matt Kia, who, let's face it, we're always fired up to hear from, we're going to give a special shout out today to Fruitables in Toms River. But first, I welcome you to subscribe to this podcast. Please give it a rating and a review. And please give me a follow on Twitter @RealMikeSmall. Follow me, and I'll follow you right back. The Killin Me Smallz podcast is a proud part of the Painted Lines Podcast Network. Check out the site, paintedlines.com. or on YouTube. Let's bring Matt Doherty onto the podcast.
Seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Fred Brown looking. Oh, way to Worthy. Worthy 5. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Oh, the pass is intercepted by James Worthy.
So I'm really excited to welcome Matt Doherty to the Killin Me Smallz podcast. Matt, I don't even know if you remember this, but it was back in, I think, 1991 or 92. I was doing Coach Smith's TV show, and you had just gotten the job at Davidson as an assistant coach. And I came down to Davidson from Chapel Hill and did a story on you for our Where Are They Now segment. And you had just gotten off of Wall Street, and you were so kind. I think you even bought me a sandwich. But it's been really cool following your career since then.
That must have been a weak moment for me. It sounds like you owe me one.
I probably do.
So, yeah. No, it was a long time ago, but someone described things like the days are long, but the years go by fast. And I think that's very true. I sent a picture to Buzz Peterson today that my wife took of Buzz and I at Michael Jordan's first retirement. And, he said, time flies. And it's so bizarre because it seems like yesterday that I started out at Davidson. That was like 31 years ago. And, quit my job, moved to Charlotte, thought I was going to get in the real estate business, got into coaching. And it took me and my wife a lot of places, some high highs, low lows, but overall it's been a great run and learned a lot.
Well, I've admired so much from afar how humble and candid you've been about all of your experiences, and now you're sharing that. And I want to get into it a little bit, but all of America is talking about, because honestly, there's nothing else fun to talk about right now, as you know. All of America is talking about The Last Dance, the documentary last night on Michael Jordan and the 98 Bulls. I want you to think back a little bit. You were a sophomore when Michael came in, and of course you guys won the national championship that year, but do you remember the first time you met him?
I think so. Yeah. I think he walked into practice. He always liked to wear, and he was doing it last night. He loved to wear a baseball cap, kind of the tab, the tab one in the back, and he'd make it. He kind of has a small head, and he would make it smaller, and it kind of sit on his head. And Michael was always clean, liked to dress. He wore nice polo shirts. He ironed his jeans, and I remember him coming in for his visit, And I think we were practicing, and, just kind of hung out and started, shooting the ball a little bit, just a little gregarious, brought great energy. And, what stood out is his physique, shoulders and long arms. And then, was the next year when I started playing with him, and your first impressions were like, it's amazing. I used to joke, like, I was a sixth man my freshman year, and here comes Michael Jordan and Buzz Peterson, and Buzz was the player of the year in the state, and both were McDonald All-Americans. And all of a sudden, I jokingly say, I'm looking at Michael and I'm looking at Buzz. I look at Michael, I look at Buzz. I look at Michael, I look at Buzz. And I say to myself, Buzz, I'm going to beat you out.
That was it, huh?
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to beat Michael out. So it just was a real thrill to play with such talent. I mean, from Al Wood to Jimmy Black to Michael, James, Sam Perkins, Brad Doherty, Kenny Smith, Joe Wolf, Buzz. We had great players that were great teammates, and we cared about one thing, and that was winning. And, when Michael talks about the fundamentals and practice was hard, and we ran a clean program. And, it was really kind of funny was when you watch the Last Dance, was a letter he wrote to his mother asking for her to put money into his account.
Stamps, right? He wanted some stamps.
And I said, you know what? If that's not telling of how we ran a clean program, I don't know what else is. Because if Michael Jordan didn't get paid, nobody's getting paid.
So he was Mike Jordan when he got there, he said. And then after that game in 82 against Georgetown, he became Michael. What are some memories of Mike Jordan that you have? The early days.
Well, I just think that he was he brings great energy. I just think Michael brings great energy. He likes being around people. He loved to tease. He had a good sense of humor. Obviously very competitive. I mean, I remember playing in a sports festival with him, which was a thing that they had college players would play. And it was like the mini Olympics for the country. And it was in Syracuse, and we played Galaga video game. And we just poured in quarters after quarters after quarters, and just want to compete in everything, whether it be video games, shooting pool, playing basketball. And so he was very energetic, and that's a real gift. I think I talk about it a lot in leadership. Jack Welch, who was the former CEO of GE, who recently passed away, talked about the 4 things he looked for in people. 1 was energy, and 2, could you energize others? 3, could you execute? And could you do that with an edge? And Michael had all 4 of those in spades.
What was he like during downtime? I mean, just sitting and having a hamburger. Did he always have it on? I know Roy Williams said in the documentary that, he was the only person that could turn it on and turn it off, and he never turned it off. What about just like sitting and having a burger or a milkshake or hanging out? Was it always trash talk?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, he liked to pick, and I like to pick, and it's pick about whatever. Could be, the clothes you're wearing, the way your hair's cut, to, whatever. Is always teasing. And the thing about it, he's competitive. So everything's competitive. And if you didn't have thick skin, you didn't last long,
Yeah.
But yeah, he was very conscientious. I think that it was really cool to, the letter his mom read about, wanting money in his account and stamps. And, he wrote my mother a handwritten note that I came across the other day, and just very conscientious. And I think that's a real, usually, it's not rocket science. good kids come from good parents, and he had great parents. And they were very welcoming. I remember going to Wilmington for the Azalea Festival, which is a big deal in North Carolina. And, his parents let me stay at their house, and just very welcoming family, very loving family. And mom and dad always smile and positive and, really, really just a good family.
Yeah, I had a chance to meet his dad several times because when I was doing Coach Smith's TV show, we had a booth where we videotaped the game, and his dad would come join us in there to kind of get away. And God, he couldn't have been a nicer guy.
Right. Always wore that hat.
Yep.
And, was a mini Michael, I mean, it's funny, Michael and his brother Larry, who's happened to be 5'8", but Larry played like Michael just at 5'8", and Michael just happened to be 6'6".
When you watch that documentary and you hear these stories about, every day he would point to somebody in practice, I'm coming at you today, all that kind of stuff. And, he punched Steve Kerr in the face and all the legendary stories that you hear. Was it anything like that at Carolina practice? And I know one of the greatest things that nobody gets to see are the summer pickup games when all the pros come back and the players. And I got to see him play in a couple of those, but before he was Michael Jordan, was he like that?
Yeah, well, the drills are very competitive, and whether it be a shooting drill, you always kind of compete in a shooting drill, to the one-on-one drills. And I remember there's this one drill Coach Smith called it the dribble use drill, where you had to pressure a guy on the sideline and play him head up one-on-one. And, as the line formed, no one wanted to be in front of Michael because if you went from offense to defense. So you didn't want to have to guard Michael because he was going to embarrass you. And I told the story the other day on the ACC network that kind of what you alluded to earlier was in the locker room, he would look around in the locker room and point to somebody and say, I'm going to get you today. And that meant that he was going to dunk on that person in practice. And so inevitably it would happen. And, we would all laugh and kind of chuckle in practice. And Coach Smith, who ran a very tight ship, was a little kind of like, surprised that we were laughing. Like, what are we laughing about? Like, and we would kind of shuffle off to the next drill. But, that was Michael. And I think that the great players like to create that conflict because it heightened their level. It heightened their energy. And you didn't want to, not that you could, but you never wanted to really embarrass Michael on the court, whether it be a pickup game or practice, because if you blocked his shot or stole his ball, then he would get mad and he just raised his game and it was over. So if you ever stole his ball or blocked his shot, you were like, didn't show him up. Because if you try to show him up and talk a little junk, between his physical gifts and his mental gifts, it was over.
And he always, you talked about turning it on and turning it off after a game, a tough loss, a big win. Was he different?
I think we all were. It was a pretty good group, man. Pretty competitive group.
I tell you, that 84 team is the most underrated team of all time.
Well, I think it was one of the best teams of all time. It just didn't win a championship.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. And to say that Michael took a loss harder than me, I don't think so. I'm still pissed that we lost to Indiana and we lost, Kenny Smith got hurt in the LSU game. The Arkansas game at Arkansas, those games still stick with me as much as the national championship win against Georgetown. And I think most players, most coaches will remember maybe the losses as much as they remember the wins.
Yeah, no, that's That's good stuff there. The other thing that I think a lot of people don't know, and I'm going to fast forward your journey a little bit. We talked about you coaching at Davidson and then eventually at Kansas under Roy Williams. You had a great year at Notre Dame and came back to Carolina. Jordan was a big part of recruiting you to Chapel Hill, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Coach Smith was a masterful recruiter. He probably didn't get enough credit for that. I mean, it's obvious he accumulated great talent, but, people didn't say, oh, he was a recruiter. They thought of him as a coach. But he was so savvy and understood that, it takes great talent to win. He would say, I can draw up a play to get the ball to the block, then recruiting takes over. And so, he knew that it'd be tough for me to say no to Michael. And he kind of told Michael, I'm sure, what to say. And that if I didn't take the job, he was going to probably go outside the family and hire Rick Majerus. Well, I didn't want anybody outside the family to coach at North Carolina. So that's one of the main reasons I probably took the job.
And I actually, you know what? I want to get into that a little bit. Let's take a quick commercial break. Many people want to do more during this time of COVID-19, want to help and want to contribute. One such place to think about is A Need We Feed, a wonderful charity that helps feed the homeless. This charity was called into action to now save local restaurants as well. They started an initiative called Supporting Our Restaurants as We Help Others. They use the donations they receive to purchase discounted meals from their restaurant partners who are barely staying afloat. Then they distribute those hot meals to those in need. It's a win-win. They are now being asked to provide 800 meals a week to big brothers, big sisters, children and families, our veterans in distress, our homebound seniors, homeless teens, frontline workers, and our emergency families in need. Please check out www.aneedwefeed.org to find out how you can support or reach out to me through this podcast. I'll put you in touch with them. A Need We Feed, doing great things for our community. So are you hungry for something really good in the Toms River area? Stop by Fruitables in the shopping center where Marshall's is on Bay Avenue. Man, those things are so good. My favorite is the Muscle Up Bowl. It's got a base of chocolate whey protein, organic acai with banana, topped off with granola, banana, and peanut butter. There's so many other good choices. They are staying open from 10 to 3 on weekdays and 11 to 5 on weekends. Do me a favor and mention the Killin Me Smallz podcast. If you do that, you get 15% off. You can order on DoorDash or online, or you can go through the Fruitables app or just simply call ahead. Stop by Fruitables, get 15% off for something really unique and delicious. Now back to the podcast.
This is Ian Rappaport from NFL Network. You're killing me, Smallz. Stay tuned for more from Mike Small.
So you come back to Chapel Hill as the head coach, and you are immediately the National Coach of the Year. Can you talk about what that transition was like? I know that you've articulated that it was that first year, even though the team did well, that led to some of the things that you kind of wish you had to do over again.
Yeah, I think the tough thing was I got the job in July. Coach Guthridge resigned in June. Most coaches resign, retire, or get fired in February, March. And so to start in July versus April 1st, which is when I started at Notre Dame, was hard for a lot of reasons. I didn't get to really, manage that change smoothly because everything was ramped up so much due to the time crunch. July is the busiest recruiting month of the year. So that was a priority. But to come in and have the drastic change in a program that hadn't seen drastic change in over,
a long time,
35 years.
Yeah.
Really, Coach Smith, it wasn't drastic change because he took over. He was an assistant. He took over for Frank McGuire.
Right.
It really hadn't seen drastic change, probably since Coach McGuire was hired. So that was very difficult on a lot of people. And if I had to do it over again, I would have been more sensitive towards managing change than I was at the time.
How did your relationship with Coach Smith change from being one of his players to, now taking over his baby?
Yeah, that was hard because I think I probably always viewed him as Coach Smith, and he always probably viewed me as the player. And then to be coaching, just think, you have children, Mike?
I've got 4.
Yeah. So, they're always going to be, like, I remember when my grandmother was, living with us, and she looked at my mother as her daughter, always as her daughter. And my mother was, let's say 50 at the time, so she would talk to my mother kind of like she would talk to her daughter. And so even as I was coaching and I was, whatever, say 40, I still felt like a player with Coach. And I think he still probably viewed me as more of a player. And so, that was a tough dynamic that I probably, looking back, should have managed that differently. Like I was intimidated by him in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So for me I remember one of his good friends said to me, you should call Coach more. And I'm like, call him more, like that's like, like we don't, it's like going to lunch with him or going to, we play golf, we go to lunch, we'd have lunch once in a while, but it was not, I'm sure, as comfortable as it was for him to do that with Coach Williams.
Right.
Because he had a different relationship with Coach Williams than he had with me. So to go from, the player to all of a sudden the head coach of North Carolina, and, that was an somewhat of an awkward dynamic, probably for both of us.
When it all ended, there's no reason to retrace that part. And I think you can look back and, I look back, you were in your 3rd year and you had the toughest schedule in the country, still won 19 games, and your best player was hurt. So I think you could make an argument that you shoulda, woulda, coulda been given a couple more years to try, but whatever happened, happened. And,
right.
None of my business. Were you ever able to reconcile that relationship with Coach Smith?
No. In my mind, I was, but I never got the chance to sit down with him, and I tried, and I do think he avoided it. I think Coach Smith is not afraid of conflict when he's in charge, but when he's not in charge, I don't think he's comfortable. You see, like most people, most
probably,
coaches,
yeah.
you like control. And so when you're not sure what's coming, you don't want to face that. And so I tried to meet with him, and, it was never convenient for whatever reason. And then when I finally got around to talking with Coach Williams about sitting down, this was 6 years after I resigned, Coach Smith was in bad health.
Right.
So it was just Roy and I. And, but in my mind, I reconciled it. That the toughest thing I had to do was forgive. And not only forgive maybe Coach Smith and Roy and Dick Bedore and Chancellor Measer, but I had to forgive myself too. Because, if anyone, I had the biggest role in all that. Because I can control me. I maybe couldn't control others.
Yeah.
But if I did a better job in managing change and managing up to Coach Smith and managing former players and managing the secretaries and managing that magnitude of that program, it would have gone smoother. But, that's why I got in the leadership business, Mike, because there's no formal leadership training in college athletics, which is asinine because all we do on college campus is lead young people, whether it be a professor or dean of a department or the chancellor or a president or a provost. That's all you do, but it's not taught. And so as I went on this leadership journey, I was sitting in these classes saying, oh my gosh, I'm learning about emotional intelligence. I never knew what emotional intelligence was in 2003. It was never taught to me. I did have an executive coach in Dr. Jerry Bell, but that was all new to me, and looking back, I probably should have worked with him more. And I've said this, and I'm in the process of writing a book, that I should have hired in some capacity someone like Eddie Fogler, who was retired, coached at North Carolina, knew Coach Smith and the program as well as anybody, knew me, and would have been able to help me navigate the rough seas of leadership, especially at a place like North Carolina at that time.
Like a consigliere almost, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. I do some executive coaching. And I think that, to give a fresh set of eyes, and especially someone like Eddie Fogler, who would have been like, hey, Matt, like I talk about landmines, where are the landmines and how to avoid them? Well, there are a lot of landmines, and I stepped on a few.
Well, this is why I'm so, you and I talked about this before. This is why I love your story so much. There's a lot of people in your situation that would have just disappeared. And the fact that you came back and now you're giving back, you learned your journey about emotional intelligence and leadership, and you're speaking, you're helping, you're coaching coaches. I think that's incredible. I think that's a gift.
Well,
and it's something a lot of people don't do.
Well, it's out of pain comes your passion. And, I realized that it's a soft skill that is necessary in every phase of life, whether you're a parent, a member of a community, a church member, a boss. Part of leadership is, you also have to have good followers. So, you also got to coach people to follow. How do you follow? How are you a good teammate? How can you support your leader? Everyone thinks it's easy until you, as they say in basketball, you slide over 18 inches to the head coaching position. You realize, oh my gosh, it's lonely at the top, and the thing that leaders it can crush them, and they really have to share. I've worked with a gentleman, and he said, you create an environment where I can be vulnerable with you, and that's when you really connect, and you feel like you can help somebody. They have to get to that point. If they don't feel they need it, then I can't help them.
And you can't fake that either. I mean, I think that's something that comes from within, from your character, being genuine, and to be able to do that. So that's a skill.
Well, I appreciate it. It's, I enjoy coaching. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy helping people get better. And whether I'm coaching basketball or coaching executives, and leadership is a learned behavior. And that's one of the things I learned when I was taking some courses that really was one of the most exciting things I've ever read, because after I lost my job, I was crushed. I was emotionally crushed. I lost my confidence. I thought, well, maybe I'm not a good leader. And so when I read that leadership is a learned behavior, you can get better. There are techniques, there are skills. You can rewire your brain to manage situations better. And so when you go from, and this was a Jerry Bell thing, I think he called it the pyramid of success. When you climb the ladder, when you start out as an assistant coach, you really only have a few things you're really charged with, like recruiting and scouting reports and maybe help run camp. But as you move up, those technical skills go away, and it's more the interpersonal skills and managing people. And so the skill set flips. And so, that's the art part of it. There's the science, and then there's the art. There's, the science of coaching and the art of coaching. And I was good at the science of coaching. Like, I could put together a good practice plan. I could put in good strategies. I can scout the opponent. I can attack their weakness. I could put our players in position to be successful. But that all doesn't matter if the players don't emotionally invest in the leader.
Looking back, I'm going to go back to Michael for a minute. I read a quote that he was pissed off when you got let go or when you resigned.
Yeah, he left me a long voicemail. Yeah.
Where I know you came back in 2018 for the dedication of Roy Williams Court. Where do you stand now with everybody? Do you feel like it's all behind you and you're back in the quote unquote family?
Yeah, I think so. I feel it. I think Coach Williams has done right by me. Little things like in the coach's locker room, he has pictures of all the former head coaches, and Frank McGuire, Dean Smith, Bill Guthridge, and me. And he didn't have to do that. That made me feel really good.
Well, how has your relationship changed with him after being, you were his assistant? You go to Carolina, then he replaces you.
Yeah, it's awkward. Mike, if, let's say, your best friend, you and your wife get a divorce and your best friend marries your wife.
That's a good, interesting way to put it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same.
No.
But it can be respectful. And I think that's what it is.
That's amazing. I can't let you out of here without asking you this. You coached against Krzyzewski. You won a couple of big games. The Carolina Duke rivalry, man. It's what it's all about. What was it like? I mean, what was it like preparing for those games, being in the middle of it, recruiting against Krzyzewski, meeting him before and after games? What can you tell us about that?
I loved it. I loved preparing for those games. I liked recruiting against Duke. At least you want to go against the best.
Yep.
And he has said this often about Coach Smith. Coach Smith made him a better coach. Iron sharpens iron. So he made me a better coach. He made me a better recruiter. And I hope I made in 3 short years, I hope I challenged him and forced him to, maybe think outside the box a little bit or get out of his comfort zone and grow. I know he did that to me. You better be prepared. And so it was to then win a game or two, was really fulfilling. It was really exciting. And, the energy you get in that rivalry as a player and a coach is unlike any other.
Matt, I can't thank you enough for joining the podcast. I hope we can have you again back when we have a college basketball season. I'd love you to weigh in. Wish you absolutely the best of luck. How can people follow you on Twitter, follow what you're doing from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I have a website. It's coachmattdoherty.com. And on Twitter, it's @DohertyMatt.
Make sure you give them a follow. Everybody, thanks for joining the Killin Me Smallz podcast. We'll talk to you next week.